Hey, thank you very much for checking out this video. I want to share a story with you of something that happened to me very personally in the last couple of days. And it's honestly probably a little bit crazy and strange, maybe to some, and it was strange even for me. I understand how sensitive this subject and this whole situation is, and I had an experience as a part of it that was kind of shocking. Now, to be honest, the last couple of days, I've really been trying to figure out and wonder if I should share this and what I would say. And yet every part of me, and even the experience I had of Charlie himself, said, please share this. This is really important to do. So I want to take some time here to talk about what happened on September 10th, shortly after Charlie Kirk's assassination. Before I begin, I also want to say that this is the truth of my experience. This is just what happened. And please have your own experience while watching this. You don't necessarily have to believe that what I went through was actually the highest, greatest truth and reality, but this is what took place. I want to start by saying, leading up to this event, before this took place, in the last couple of days before then, I have been really going through it. I'd been having a really difficult time with some personal challenges in my own life, and I had been taking a lot of personal time to reflect and to meditate and to process everything that had been going on. And so then when my friend shared the link and told me what happened, probably 30 minutes after the assassination and it was going viral, he showed me the video and I saw, as many people probably have, the scene of him getting killed and how completely brutal it was. And it really hit me. It hit me in a deeper way, like that triggered something for me, because for a very, very long time, I had had this thought something similar could actually happen to me, knowing that I was kind of in a controversial position and I was talking about, science and spirituality and trying to unify the whole world around a common higher understanding of the world and the way that things work. And I thought, if I had continued to grow in popularity and I had been doing some public speaking or talked at a big event or something like that, maybe something like that could happen to me and I might be killed in broad daylight. And so when I saw that happen to Charlie, someone who I actually recently made a video talking about, or I spoke about in this one video, maybe I'll put a link here, about my thoughts on the abortion argument and Charlie's responses and conversations in his Surrounded video that he did only a couple months ago. It just really hit me, and I felt somewhat connected with him, and I was just, I don't know, it really, I kind of exploded with emotion in sorrow for, probably the same thing as what so many people felt when they saw it. And so I had to just take some time and be with that too, on top of everything. And I went for this long walk. And when I got home, I was still a little bit shaken up. So I just thought, I'm going to sit in meditation here and I'm just going to be, just let all of the energy pass through and let myself come back to a slightly more centered, grounded place. And then something very interesting happened, which was that as I was sitting there deep in meditation, I suddenly saw Charlie. And it was like my third eye just was really open. And I don't mean I just saw him like I was imagining him. I mean, like, even with my eyes open, a vision of him appeared right in front of me. And he was like, hi. And I was like, what is happening right now? Am I going crazy? Am I delusional? What is happening? And I also at the same time didn't want to say, I'm just making this up, because what if this was really him and this was his soul coming and talking to me right after the event? And he said, yeah, no, I'm dead. I'm dead. And I'm like, why are you here? Why are you talking to me? And we started talking, and then I said, wait, hold on, sorry. I need to get like a notepad. I need to write down what it is you're saying. And it kind of became this thing of, he kind of asked me, he did ask me if I would share a message with the world of what he experienced after death and what he was seeing before he really dissolved into light. And I want to talk about all of that. And so I was scribbling notes as quickly as I could because I didn't know how much time I would have with him. So as I mentioned, as a part of all of this, I was like, why are you here? Why are you talking to me specifically? And he said very clearly, he said, in fact, I wrote it like this. He was kind of like, let me just write through you right now. And I'm a little bit wondering, do I read this in the first person or the third person of how it was written? But he basically said that he's choosing me to communicate this because of my clarity of connection between the higher and the lower worlds. Because I've spent a lot of time in mystic prayer and ceremony and have been out of body a couple of times. And because I also create a lot of content in the world and I can publish information and, reach a lot of people. And so I guess I was a good candidate, or maybe one of his guides or angels or beings that he met on the other side maybe brought him to me. I'm not sure about that actually. And so then I started asking him questions, and it kind of became an interview for a little bit. I'm like sitting there in meditation being like, okay, and then what about this? As we were getting to know each other, one of the things that he described as he was finding me and seeing, I guess, I don't really know how he would be visualizing it, but in finding me, he said this, and I'm a little bit hesitant to say this at all, although I think it's right to share. It's just that he was very complimenting of me, and I don't want to have this energy of like, he said I was amazing. But he kind of did. He said, I was amazed by your impact to the light of the souls of the world. And, he kind of described that one of the things that he discovered and realized on the other side so quickly was that the impact that he was having was not as impactful as he actually wanted it to be. Because even though he was, a very profound public speaker and an excellent debater, oftentimes his dialogues or his debates and his whole thing was having fights with people and challenging people, and it was very conflicting in its nature. And one of the things that he told me was he was amazed about how my energy was more about just lifting up the light of the souls within, rather than I'm right and you're wrong kind of thing. And that was very moving to me. But again, you can see why I was kind of nervous to share it. But that led to him saying why he was choosing me to communicate all of this was just, again, because of my clarity of connection and because of the impact that I had had with a lot of people. So then he also started saying, wow, like he was amazed that in this higher world, everything was so much more expanded and connected than he ever possibly knew before. In fact, he said very specifically, and I had to write this verbatim, he said, a lot of the things I believed in were not correct because everything is so much more expanded and connected. And there is more nuance in a lot of the conversations that he was having. And we started to talk about some of the specifics, because he was very firm on a lot of very specific subjects before. And as we started to go through some of them, one of the things that we discussed was, it actually might be better not to get into those things on this video. Ultimately, everybody has to come up with their own understanding of the way that things are. And what happened to him was not right at all. But it was also still very interesting to me to hear him not necessarily going back on his old views, but also realizing that there was a higher truth that was available. And if he had had access to that information beforehand, some of the things that he stood for or would have talked about would have actually been different. So then from there, we were talking about, I was like, I don't know, how much time do I have with you here? And we weren't exactly sure. But I just started asking him, I'm like, what are you seeing? Like, what does it look like over there, right? And he said, it's beautiful, heavenly. He said, imagine oceans and rivers of luminescent light and color. And one of the things that he kind of described was that he was in, imagine like here's the earth, and then, or like the top of part of the earth plane, and then here's a part of the astral, but then it goes up really, really, into a cosmic beyond. And so right when he died, he was right in this plane here, but that he was going up to a greater reality for a time, or a higher world, or a heavenly realm for a time. I often would call it the astral in my spirit science videos. And for those who are interested, I'll just throw out, we have our Christ Consciousness series, and there's this one video, I'll put a tag here, The Science of Christ Consciousness, that actually explains how those different dimensions work. And a lot of what he said matched my understanding and research and my cosmic experiences of that, those planes of existence. So then one of the things he said was, describing those higher worlds, he said that he's going up to a higher world soon, and that as he does, parts of his personality, parts of his human identity is going to dissolve a little bit because he's going beyond. But he's hanging out for a little bit here to say goodbye to the world that he's leaving behind. I remember actually in this, I asked him, I said, well, again, you're coming here and you're talking to me, and this is amazing, and I'm honored that you're talking to me, but like, can you go and talk to your family? Can you see or visit your loved ones or parents or anybody, your friends? And I remember he actually went, okay, wait, let me go and check. And he sort of flew off for a little while. And then I was alone and I thought, okay, maybe that's it. And he's gonna see some other people. And then maybe 10 or 15 minutes later, he came back and he said, no, they can't see me right now. And there's so much grief and heartbreak and shock and everything. They can't see me. And so you're the only person or one of the human people I can talk to right now. And I went, huh, okay. And then I thought, and I asked him, well, maybe tonight, can you visit them in their dreams? Maybe that would be a thing. And he was like, yeah, maybe I'll try that. And I never got a confirmation, of course, whether or not he was able to do that later, because it was, a day had passed. Maybe he did, and how beautiful if that was the case. So then, after he came back, we talked for a little while longer, and it did seem like he was starting to dissolve into light. And in our conversations, a couple of the things that I wrote down was he wanted to say, everything's okay, even though this is a major tragedy, that for him and what he was experiencing was he was free, that he was luminescent, he was happy being in the fullness of his soul and being able to travel this cosmic astral plane that was filled with joy and light and magic rivers and everything. He's like, this is okay. And I asked him and I said, but like, aren't you sad? And he said, it's an interesting thing. On one level, again, there's all this, his soul just being expansive. There's a lack of sadness in that. But then he also has a sadness in understanding how much grief and heaviness and pain there is here in the material world because of his loss. What his family and his friends and his parents and everybody in his life and so many people who were fans and followers of his work, what everybody must be feeling. He feels that grief as well, or he said he felt that grief as well. But as a part of that whole conversation, I captured this one thing very specifically. He said, now I'm not so sad because I understand how things really work. Though I understand my family is sad, but also I know that we're all going to be again together one day and it's all going to be okay. In fact, he added to that and he said, we don't really lose a loved one. We just part ways for a time. And one of the final things that he said to me before we parted ways was, please tell everybody I love them. Sorry, this is it was a really emotional day for me too. And I felt that pain with everybody. I personally, even while Charlie was alive, and I remember watching a lot of his work, I always thought that I didn't necessarily agree with everything that he stood for and argued against or talked about. And yet at the same time, I just found him to be such a remarkable human. And I really, really admired his courage for day after day standing up in front of so many people and creating conversation around things that are important, So I think that if we had ever met in person, I think even if we disagreed on whatever, we probably would have had an amazing friendship and a lot of really good conversations. And so that I thought was going to be it, but then it wasn't. He left basically for the night, and then the next morning, I remember I just woke up and I was still having a little bit of trouble sleeping. So I woke up pretty early and I had some meditation, and I probably like 5:30 or something in the morning, and I was like, I'm just gonna play a video game for a little bit and just keep feeling before I get into the workday. And then I remember turning on the game, and then all of a sudden I saw him again, and I was like, wait, you're back? What's happening? And he said, I'm coming back to life. And I was like, what do you mean? And I was really confused. And so I was like, hold on a second. I just had to look. I opened my computer and I went on the news because I thought maybe he's not really dead. Like maybe the wound wasn't fatal, but he left his body for a time. And it was like a really extreme near-death experience. And I looked online and there's nothing about that. And he was really dead. And I was like, I should just ask you, what do you mean I'm coming back to life? And he said, I'm going to live another lifetime. I'm going to come back into this world. And I thought, oh, that's what you mean. And he's like, yeah. And he kind of explained this, but then I confirmed it because this was also a match of my understanding and I was asking him questions about it. But basically, when he went up to the higher world and the great beyond, or whatever we want to call it, the astral, time works differently there. So he might have been up there for what could have been years, maybe many years, I don't really know. But coming back down to this plane, only a day had passed because time is just different between the different dimensions. And we've talked about that as well. And I've got spirit science videos if you're interested, talking about time, space, and space-time, but I'm not going to get into that here. But essentially, yeah, time works differently in different dimensions. And so he may have been gone for a really long time, but he was coming back for just a moment, and part of his personality was still there. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to be coming back, and I just wanted to let you know. And I'm really excited. And I was like, so maybe, again, not knowing how the time works, but maybe if 20 or 30 years goes by and we see another person who is acting similar to Charlie Kirk, we'll see if he does the same kind of things, showing up. Maybe that's him, and it's sort of a reincarnation. Again, this was just the truth of my experience, and then we parted ways once more, and that was that. Yeah, it's been a lot the last couple of days, and I wanted to film this and produce it and share it as soon as I could. And there's just been really a lot going on, and I also just have been a bit nervous on how to share this whole thing. So I just want to say, I guess in closing, thank you very much for listening. Whether you choose to believe in or disbelieve what I'm sharing, I hope that you can see where it's coming from. I'm not trying to just make light of an experience or talk about something just for the sake of talking about it. This really happened to me, and I was really blown away by it. And he was saying, please publish this. So I'm going to do that. God bless. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.